getting this started, Spence Farm Foundation is an education foundation where we bring health professionals, food professionals, and farmers together. And we do that in a way, we bring them to the farm. Our goal is to connect bakers and chefs and doctors and dietitians to the farmer. And we're looking at it through the lens of regeneration. And when they come to the farm, it's not about how you farm as a farmer, it's about why you farm and what those impacts are in a social setting, in an economic setting, and an environmental setting. The other purpose is that we are bringing these professionals to the farm so that the farmers and the farms can be introduced to these professionals and learn what their impact is on the social impact, the economic impact, and the environmental impact, because that's a conversation that we have to bring together to identify how do we move our food system forward, because it's going to take all of us. We are moving forward. It's a team that's wholly committed to this idea that regional grains is one of the things that will change our environment and our community, both on an economic and a social impact. The first panelist is chef and baker Ellen King, who is the founder of Hewn Bakery. And one of the things, many things that I love about Ellen, we believe that farm food and health, we need all three of those things to move the food system forward. And Ellen's background, she spent some time on a farm. She went through culinary school. She's owning and operating her own bakery. And she also partners with a physician in Chicago where they are teaching med students about culinary nutrition and whole food nutrition and disease prevention. And it's a conversation that starts to build bridges amongst farmers and chefs and healthcare professionals. So I'm really excited to learn more about what's happening in her world and that she's here to share that with us.
One of the things that strikes me the most about baking is historically it's such a tie to our country, the founding of our country, and I think having our meeting here is really fitting, especially because Chicago and St. Louis were the two that really essentially established the modern industrial farm as we know it, and even how grain became graded, and grain was divided into different ratings, all based by the Chicago Board of Trade. So it's funny because what I think we're doing at our bakery is going back to almost the 1840s, but using all the best technology to make that happen. People are meant to eat wheat, meant to eat bread. It's why it's in every religion, talks about breaking bread. It's why it's a binder. It brings people together. And that's what I believe bread does. And that starts with the varieties that we're growing. Not looking at just the handful that we cultivate, but really looking at the old farm journals from the 1920s or before and understanding what those varieties were and where they grew and why they grew, because grain is very much a local creature. But just the idea of rebuilding a seed base, this is the amount of work that it takes to do, but this is what customers are also really interested in. So from an economics perspective, I'm only able to do this because my customers are demanding it, but we're also really educating them about why is our bread different, why is the wheat different, why should you care about where you're getting your wheat? And I say people should start looking at their wheat exactly how people look at wines, right? Different regions of wine have different grapes grown. The same can be said of wheat. We just don't have that diversity right now, but we will, and that's what I am really passionate and excited, and I feel like being here in Chicago and knowing that the 1850s when the grain elevator was invented and all the modern equipment, we can actually use technology to go back in time and get the best parts of farming and make the farmers actually make more money and not have it be based on commodities and futures. And that's another benefit of the heritage varieties, is that farmer can set the price as opposed to the markets out there that are always just looking at wheat and grains as a commodity that's totally removed from what we use it as, which is our life source.
One of the many exciting things about Harold and his farming operation with his son and nephew is that they're building a mill. And one of Harold's purposes, and that he feels that he's being led to, is to bring and build farmers. And so he's working with different farmers from different areas to build this infrastructure.
My name is Harold Wilkin. I see a few familiar faces out here today. First of all, I'll give you a little background. The name of our farm is Janie's Farm Organics. I'm a fifth generation farmer, and then my son, who's also in the audience, is our sixth generation. For 23 years, I was a conventional farmer. Along about probably my 10th year, I was very frustrated with conventional agriculture, looking outside the box. Actually heard Dr. Eichert speak a few years later than that. But what I realized was it wasn't who I was. Conventional farming wasn't. But it took all the way from the mid-90s to 2002 for me to have the ability to go in the direction that I felt comfortable with. We're going to fast forward to today. Our farm is 2,000 plus acres. We're in a basic rotation of corn, soybeans, and wheat, but instead of just being corn, soybeans, and wheat, we're diversifying into grains that go for human consumption. Last year we shipped about 30,000 bushels of wheat. It was soft red winter wheat, and it most all went to chicken feed on the East Coast. And I'm sitting there looking at this grain flowing into a semi that's going to be on a truck for 8 to 12 hours and thinking this is absolutely nuts. And one of the things that we recognized was that we wanted to take Janie's Farm not just as a agronomic farm that grew a crop that became a commodity and went off in a truck. We wanted to feed people. And our location is 70 miles outside of Chicago along I-57. And so the logistics were that if we did some things, we could feed people. So one of the things we recognized was milling, and this was in January of 14. So you know how it is, you get busy, you go about your business, and in September of that year, I was contacted by a flour broker from New York who said, hey, I'm looking for an organic farmer who would raise hard red winter wheat, hard red spring wheat, and mill it and take it into Chicago for some of my customers. And I said, could you repeat that? There's been a lot of divine intervention, I say, in what we're doing. But anyway, that then was the birth of, hey, there's our market. So then we started backing up and go, okay, what do we got to change as a farm? In the spring of 2016, we put out 75 acres of hard red winter wheat. We walked around on that field, and at the end of the day, the quality was great. The yield was comparable to the soft red winter wheat, and we were on our way to making a product that we could feed people with. Well, as a farmer, if I need to change the way I agronomically farm, I can go to the John Deere dealer, or I can go to the Case IH dealer, or I can go to a farm sale. I can buy a piece of equipment, I can have it in the field by the next day, and that's if I take the time to grease it. And you know, I'm on my way. I can change whatever I need to do. Same way with a drill or a planter or whatever. When it comes to milling flour, there's a few things that you need to know. And one of them, I'm going to quote my son, Dad, the next time we try something like this, we are going to allot double the money and 4 times the time that it takes to get it up and running. Because we were planning on doing this way back in September. And Don Whiteman, he can attest, yep, Don, we're going to be running at least by October. Well, by the time you get all your ducks in a row, find the right people to help you do the metal work and the structure and everything, the next thing you know, it's February. And right now the plan is March. But what we're excited about is that no matter when it starts, we're going to have a product that we can take directly to the consumer.
My name is Josh Allen. I'm the owner of Companion Baking Company in St. Louis, and I am, quite frankly, very honored to be here and thrilled to learn more about what's going on in the community. We've been around for 23 years, and we feel like we're kind of very much in our infancy as it relates to kind of really searching and understanding locality and kind of the role that we play in here and play in that. I think, I was thinking this morning, you know, it's easy to go in front of a group of people that don't know what you do and how you do it and kind of BS your way through a few buzzwords about local and supporting and sustainable and all of that stuff. And then you get in front of a group of people who are doing it and living it every day, and you're a little bit more anxious and nervous about it because that BS quotient definitely gets caught pretty quickly. So I want to acknowledge that we're pretty naive to the whole thing. We're doing our best, but we believe very strongly that we need to be doing a lot more. I think as a mature organization and one that's 23 years old, we have a responsibility and accountability to the community that's going to force us to do more with that. Josh Galliano, who's here, who's our production manager, an incredibly talented chef who came on board with us a couple of years ago and is really helping me kind of drive this conversation as it relates to local. We've really kind of bantered back and forth how we define that word with what we're doing. It hasn't historically been a region where we can get great agricultural products in order to make bread. So all of our flour historically has come from Kansas, and a lot of instances from western Kansas, sometimes from North Dakota. But in general, when we start talking about, you know, making bread with local products, how are we going to define locality? Is it 150 miles? Is it 2 hours? You know, what's the distance that makes sense for us? And kind of in the end, we've kind of landed on this idea that if we can meet the farmer and we can have a relationship, that I don't know that the distance really is something that makes any difference. And so we then wanted to take it a little bit further, and we said, okay, now we're a mature business, we have this facility, so how do we go backwards? We've always touted the idea and told St. Louis and asked St. Louis to buy bread from us. We're the local guy. We were in South City. We're in West St. Louis now, as we call it. But, you know, we're employing local folks, you know, buy our bread. It's a local product, and we're trying to compete with folks and other people and trying to have that conversation. And we recognize now, and a lot of the things that, you know, Josh kind of brought to the table was, how do we take that backwards, and how do we go backwards and do something with something else? So we kind of came up with this idea of just taking one bread or potentially a couple of breads and doing what we kind of referred to as a local grains project, and that's what we came up with. I guess it's been about 6 months now since we launched it, and the idea was to try to go back as far as we could to the source, use as many local products as we could in producing this bread, and then deliver it to as many people as we could with full transparency. And the idea of meeting the farmer and meeting the producer